Chapter 13 Creating a Nation. On July 12, 1991, Rabbi Herbert Friedman gave the following speech entitled Building a State, Creating a Nation at the conclusion of the Wexner Heritage Foundation Jerusalem Summer Institute. Absorbing Aliyah depends upon three things: employment, housing, and social acceptance. The last two out of the three problems are difficult and complex, but the subject of work and employment is the most critical. If this keystone is broken, the entire arch will be destroyed, and the whole enterprise of Aliyah and absorption is liable to fail. In the process of accepting immigrants, the host society and economy act like a sponge, which absorbs the olim. At the time of the Great Aliyah in the 1950s, the sponge of the absorbing society in Israel was small in size and poor in resources. There was very little capital. Housing was virtually non-existent, and there was no employment base worthy of the name. In spite of all that, in the face of enormous difficulties and numerous mistakes, a mighty enterprise was built, perhaps among the greatest since the establishment of the state. Now, as we confront a wave of Aliyah which may reach 1 million or more, the economic and social absorptive powers of Israel are immeasurably greater. However, anyone with eyes to see must understand that the state's normal capacity of absorption, that is, according to the free market model, is approaching its limits, and that as the pace of Aliyah quickens, this sponge will reach the saturation point. Any attempts at further absorption beyond that point could become dangerous and counterproductive. The most difficult problem, as we said, is locating appropriate employment for olim, in particular for those coming from the Soviet Union, without hurting the chances of native-born Israelis to find their own places within the economy and society of the land of their birth. The professional breakdown of the Soviet olim is well known. Out of every 100 olim of employable age, 25 are engineers, 20 are teachers, 15 are medical personnel, and 10 are researchers in the natural and social sciences. Despite the great deficiencies of the regime, the Soviet Union has successfully educated the overwhelming majority of its people and has provided them with professions. The Jews were among the first who benefited. Trillions of rubles were invested in the brains of Soviet olim. How will Israel absorb, within a relatively short time, the tens of thousands of new engineers, technicians, doctors, and teachers? I am convinced that a rapid and radical program must be established so that this gigantic potential resource will not be wasted, and so that its people will not become mired in bitterness and frustration that is liable to cause many of them to flee Israel. In the planning and execution of this program, there is no escaping public governmental involvement. The intervention must be massive, temporary, and transitional, lasting only until the olim are absorbed into the free market. I call this program talent pools. Perhaps the name pool evokes the unpleasant memory of the name transit camp of the 1950s. If so, it must be remembered that the transit camps were temporary, only a transitional phase on the way to a new life. Nothing of them remains. However, the main intent of the talent pools is not to create physical dwellings, but rather reservoirs of aptitude and talent. Underlying the concept of the talent pools is the knowledge that the various elements and sectors of the Israeli economy and society are not by themselves capable of absorbing very large numbers of olim. This is not only due to the absence of programs and to budgetary limits, but also because if this were done in an unrequired manner, the olim world would close off the avenues of advancement for native-born Israelis. I am proposing the establishment of talent pools according to professional groupings: talent pools for medicine, engineering, education, research, and science. Each talent pool would be paired with an existing well-developed Israeli body, which may be termed the adopting partner. Adopting partners would be asked to apply themselves energetically and creatively to the task of caring for and absorbing their talent pools. However, they would not be expected to bear any additional budgetary burden. All expenses involved in establishing the talent pools, including the minimum wage which would be paid to the olim, would be covered in their entirety by the governmental partner, which would also allocate to the adopting body a budget which would enable it to expand as to absorb more olim. These funds would come in the place of unemployment compensation and other subsidies, which without the talent pool program would have to be paid to a large number of Olim without any long-term benefit. In order to demonstrate the essence of the program, I will bring a number of examples. The governmental partner would approach a large medical center, such as Soroka in Beersheba, and would say, "We know that you have no additional budget to spare, not even a single shekel. We know that we have demanded that you streamline and become more efficient. But now we are telling you that we will establish adjacent to you a talent pool of 1,000 Olim who are in the medical and allied professions. Don't fill the already budgeted slots with these Olim. These are reserved for students who graduated here, and don't include them in your complex salary scales. All we ask of you is a positive attitude towards them, a proper division of Olim according to their professions and aptitude, as well as training and retraining according to the methods used in Israel. We also ask you to seek employment for the Olim, if only part-time or gradual in related fields." The talent pool of Soroka Hospital, for example, would draw its people from among the Olim who live in greater Beersheba, its satellite settlements, and development towns from the Negev. It is not the intent that the talent pool should turn into a residential neighborhood for Olim. Just the opposite. The talent pool should be only a focal point for employment whose workers are spread out across the region and are not segregated in living quarters exclusively for Olim. I am not disturbed by the fact that this program will be labeled Make Work, or that the initial salary to be paid to the workers in the talent pools will be called minimal wage. I am also aware of the fact that this approach is not perfect in the pure economic sense, and that there will be a certain percentage of inefficiency. The size of this percentage will ultimately depend upon the adopting partner, but a certain portion of it is unavoidable. This plan will undoubtedly involve a certain amount of pain, and no small measure of frustration among the talent pool workers, but I believe that the path towards absorption is never strewn with roses. If there is anyone with a better idea for how to absorb 500 specialists in the field of Soviet history and culture, or 500 mining engineers, let him speak up. The establishment and support of the talent pool will demand a great deal of money. The governmental body which would deal with the pools must draw these large sums from three basic sources: raising capital from within Israel by imposition of aliyah and absorption taxes, seeking contributions and loans from Jews of the diaspora, and generating capital through loans and grants from international bodies. Before long, private capital will begin to seek out the talent pools. The capital will pursue the reservoirs of untapped knowledge in the pools, and will draw out from them tens of thousands of workers who will be needed to establish and to expand enterprises. During the 1950s and 1960s, a workforce of about 1 million new workers was concentrated in Israel, which brought new capital in its wake, in the form of contributions, reparations, loans, and private investment. This combination caused an astounding growth of some 10% annually in Israel's GNP. It is entirely possible that the concentration of such a large and modern workforce, together with the capital that will follow it, will improve the situation of the Israeli economy that has been stagnant for a number of years. This pairing of new labor with new capital will lead Israel into the 21st century, and will redound to the benefit of all of Israel's inhabitants, and both native and Olim. In order to execute this plan, there is no need for additional territory. All of it can be accomplished within Israel proper. This will strengthen Israel's might and spirit on the path to peace, as well as compromise with the Arab world. With the advent of peace, new horizons will be developed for regional cooperation and for the exploitation of the knowledge that Israel will amass. In order to begin planning and realizing this program, public leaders must not only adopt it, but must demonstrate by means of personal example that the challenge of absorbing this aliyah requires courage and risk-taking beyond the scope of programs already in place. They must devote themselves to the task with all their heart in order to accomplish what must be done.